Hello, Canada. Welcome back to another edition of the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, alias Tagai. Well, seeing how the news cycle is pretty tame today, and the only thing they're really talking about is the same crap that we talked about yesterday, and hopefully I straightened it out for a lot of people. I hope you all took the time to watch that documentary. It'll open your mind and actually give you a voice, so when you do decide to say something about Ukraine, you'll actually have some knowledge about it. But today we're going to talk about the protests, because that seems to be a major push that the media is trying to push out right now, this narrative. By the way, I was going to do something on these protests, but when I was looking at them, they're even doing the cheap pan-angle cameraing where they're really small protests of wimpy nobodies. It's not worth reporting on. It's really not. I'm sure most people out there are looking at it and shaking their head going, what? Kind of like they did with the whole BLM and all the rest of those protests. Like they purposely use camera angles and stuff. They did this with Trudeau. They would take him to a mall and they had a bunch of his little goonies come in and scream and yell around him. And then all the people in the mall, because the mall's packed, would look over and then they would use their film work to say, like, look at how famous this guy is. And then the bandwagon effect kicks in. That's kind of what, that's the media's, that's how they work, right? Anyways, protests I'm talking about are against anti-corruption. Or corruption. Did you know there's over 800 of them going on right now in the last 4 days around the world? And not little. Some of these are so big you can see them from space at night because the lights are so bright. And of those, about 75% of them deal with the same people that we're going to be dealing with in our future, near future. Except for the EU. The EU is a big one in these 800. But it's NATO, the WEF, the UN, and WHO. Along with the rest of the Davos and all of these. The Davos is bad. But that's connected to the WEF. But these green tech corporations get the government's takeovers. They put in position who they want. They end up ruling for long enough that they completely corrupt the system from the judicial Supreme Court all the way down into their policing, into their military. They get to appoint everything. They change and reword certain laws in order to help these large businesses, these conglomerates, come in and destroy nations. Most of the time it is through huge projects where they claim the green initiative. And there are countries that are really, really starting to feel the effects of that. If you watch my program lots, I've done a few, especially on what Carney's corporation does, especially in Brazil, slash and burn, build dams, flood people out of their lands, etc. The one I'm going to concentrate on today is going on in Romania. It's a great example because it's very similar to our system. They had an election here not long ago, a month and a half, 2 months ago. The two left-leaning parties, so kind of like our Liberal NDP, held power for long enough that they infiltrated every system and corrupted every angle of it. Then an election came. The people were speaking out. The media wasn't talking about it. In the meantime, social media is how people were connecting. 2 days before the election, it became aware to these leftist fascist parties they were going to lose. So they already started trying to pass, using their media, the typical bullcrap, saying that these guys were corrupt, these guys were fascists, these guys were working for Putin, all the same things that they tried to do to Trump, they tried to do to Melee, etc. I'm going to play you a clip of what I call the Nostradamus moment. A lot of these great leaders, I'm not saying this guy's going to be great, who knows? But it seems like most of the leaders that do fight for the integrity of democracy and freedom seem to have these moments, either before they die, disappear, or go to jail, or win the election, which is a rarity. But it does happen, and it's happening more and more all the time. I want you to listen very closely to what this man says, because I think it's very important that you understand his Nostradamus moment. He is literally foreseeing the future, and everything he says comes to fruition.
So I want to ask you very clearly, did you know about this malign activity? Do you have any links to Russia?
Doesn't exist any any relationship with any foreign part or particularly with Russia, as they said. Doesn't exist from my side. My only relationship with the Romanian people. So the Constitutional Court of Romania, I want to be very clear from now, is a mafia court of Romania. Because they cannot accept, and nine people, because the court is a function of 9 people. 9 people decide for 19 million of people.
So I'm going to pause it there. Kind of like what you're seeing in Canada, which has happened lots, and I'm going to go backwards. Right now, prorogation. They should have had their decision made. They should have stopped every single process because it's dealing with the integrity of the nation, not a particular person, not a particular group. The entire court should have shut down and looked into this and had a decision within days. What have we heard? Crickets. This is where they pull what he's calling the mafia moment. This is where they purposely prolong things, dilly-dally, to the point where it'll be too late and then they go, well, it's moot. Now, where have you heard moot before? How about the forced vaccination of Canadians? Well, seeing as how the mandates were lifted and they're not forcing it on anybody anymore, there's no reason for us to discuss it or bring it to court. So in other words, we're going to let it happen again before we maybe decide we're going to do something about it. In most of those cases where they do that, it's against a party that the people want to do certain things, but the court then speaks up and literally holds democracy hostage with the decision. We see that lots with mostly the centrist conservative side, which seem to be the closest ties to true democracy and capitalism. We're going to move on.
This is not accept. This does mean coup d'etat, made by the state, which is installed right now in power in Romania.
If a foreign state had tried to influence this election, would you condemn that?
Absolutely, totally.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but are you saying that one of the reasons the Romanian state stopped you was because they were under pressure to prevent a peace deal in Ukraine?
Yes, for sure. They need war and they need to protect their chairs.
Romania shares a border with Ukraine on the southwest side. They've seen what's going on. They have watched their government load people who are running from Ukraine up in vans and give them back to Ukraine. Most of the time, it's very hard to catch them doing it. Sometimes when it's visible, they don't do anything and the people walk free, but we know it's happening, as well as the persecution against a lot of the religious sects that have been shut down and their churches have been stolen from them and given to a fake religion. They're witnessing this, plus they're right beside what is going on. They hear the death, the destruction, and the carnage. It's on their TVs, and they're not happy about it.
It's a dictator.
Is this just Romania you're accusing, or a wider NATO, EU?
Look, the pressure from international is huge on that. NATO become from a defense organization an offensive organization, and this cannot be accepted.
Is your suggestion that Russia should keep the territory that it has already seized in Ukraine?
For me, I don't care what they are dealing. For me, it's important to stop the war. It's not my business what is between them, to be very clear.
I just want to be clear. You're saying that some European leaders and NATO officials came together to put pressure on the Romanian establishment to stop your campaign because they don't want peace.
Exactly. They need war. And they're looking only for war.
So
the politicians...
are you convinced that you're going to win tomorrow?
Totally convinced. And for this reason they attack. Because already when the people from abroad, Romanian people, of course, they are starting for voting, and they're starting already, by the way, in the morning of Friday, which does mean yesterday, today is Saturday. Already in the first 4 or 5 hours, I had 80%, more than 80%. And they know in real time that on Sunday, probably the success will be clarified with more than 80% as percentage.
If you're right and the state is against you, do you expect the police to turn up and put you in prison?
I don't care, because I said very clear, my life is not important in front of the eternity of my people and my country and my nation.
During our conversations, you have referred to George Soros, to a sort of global banking conspiracy. You say that European leaders are trying to thwart peace on behalf of the sort of military. There will be those who say that you are a conspiracy theorist and that you have tapped into a sort of global wave of conspiracy.
Yeah, this is just the propaganda. They know they lost and they are desperate. And they are coming with this propaganda. Come on, we discussed about free people, free man. I am a free man. For this reason I am here. Because I am free until my last piece of blood. So nobody can say anything else. Whatever they want is their problem, or whatever they ask. It's time, arrive the time, for the big shift.
Now, you'll hear a lot of, especially around the EU, they use that terminology, the big shift. It's kind of like how they're onto what the WEF wants to do, the big reset. So they're using their own terminology called the big shift. In other words, it's the opposite of what the globalist elites want. It's to give the power back to the people. This is a quick catch up on where we are to date.
They remind us of the communist mentality and system of the 50s.
This is him talking, just so you know.
There is no difference. We are moving forward. The people are proving it. We are Romania. We are the power, and we are this country. And this country will not kneel before anyone.
Prosecutors hit him with a laundry list, false campaign finance statements, promoting anti-Semitic and fascist ideologies, even destabilizing Romania's constitutional order. Raids on his associates uncovered weapons and cash. His team cried foul, "Where is democracy now?" The timing was uncanny. Just as Georgescu prepared to fight again, the state struck. Was this justice catching up to a shady candidate, or a desperate bid to silence him?
The corruption was revealed. The whole planet knows what's going on in Romania now with this system. I can only salute how desperate they are.
Whose desperation, Mr. Georgescu? Is it the desperation here, or is it the desperation at 35?
It is not the desperation from here, it is also from Brussels. They showed us that the system is working as much as it can. It is almost finished. We know is not only about being slaves in our country, it's about what's going on in Brussels. We have the proof from USA, from President Trump and Mr. Vance, that we are on the right path, that all this worldwide corruption will be revealed, and the US sanctions will certainly clarify the situation in Romania.
Romania's government insists it's protecting democracy from a pro-Russian threat. But to Georgescu's supporters and Vance's allies like Elon Musk, it's the opposite, a democracy too fragile to let the people choose. If a frontrunner can be detained on murky charges, what's left of the ballot box? As Romania heads toward May, the question lingers. Will Călin Georgescu run, or will he be barred? Will voters get their say, or will the state decide their fate? J.D. Vance saw this coming. A Europe where elections bend to power, not people. Romania's story isn't just about one man's arrest. It's about a continent at a crossroads and a warning from America that went unheeded.
And this is kind of where I'm starting to get to within this collage and short story. The world is being revealed. Most of it is starting from the heart of the problem, which is the United States. And thank God the leaders there have the gonads to open the system and show the world how corrupt their country was in order to fix it and reset the world to keep democracy and people free. Now, I'm going to move on to Athens. This is Greece. This footage is actually from a week ago, but there is live footage. They are still protesting. This started because some infrastructure that was given to Green Corps, big money corporations that were moving in their parliament, in their government, killed a whole bunch of students. The students rose up. And again, like I said, with social media, it brought together multi-generations, people who have been fighting the system for decades with the people who are just realizing now how corrupt it is. And once all of this information from the US comes out, we are going to see this grow at an exponential rate. Full clashes erupted between hundreds of youths and riot police in Athens. Youths threw petrol bombs towards the police, who fired rounds of tear gas. Now, I'd like to tell you it's not just youths anymore. It has spread throughout multi-generations. People are sick of it. And it's from this accident in 2023 when 57 people, almost all students, died in that crash. Check out the amount of people in this protest. Don't you think this should be on the news? Of course not. Because mainstream doesn't want you to know that our system is just as bad, and we should be doing something about it now before it gets this bad. Before this becomes a necessity or the last resort. This is why we've got to quash mainstream media, and I need you to share, subscribe, and like. The media is pushing fear and division and hate. And if they don't start talking about the reality of what is going on in society, we are going to be next. This, yeah, this is Serbia. Exact same thing. You can see this from space at night. There are so many protesting. Same thing, green agenda, government corruption, money laundering, courts have been infiltrated, cops have been infiltrated. It's the exact same thing that's happening here. They're just speaking up, whereas we're not. These are huge. This is live footage. I backed it up. I'm probably about 3 hours behind now because I had it on pause and I've been kind of getting my stuff ready to edit for this. So again, in the evenings, you can see this from space. And it's all over the country, but mostly in the capitals. Here's a little wee bit on what's going on in Africa.
Kenya's struggles are emblematic of a larger problem plaguing several African nations, where corruption fuels inequality and stifles progress. From embezzlement of public funds to electoral fraud, the cycle of corruption traps millions in poverty while enriching the few. Other countries facing similar crises include Nigeria, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, where scandals and mismanagement dominate headlines. For Kenya, the path forward is clear but steep. The cries of its people cannot go unheard. The fight against corruption is not just a battle for justice. It's a fight for the nation's soul. Despite the challenges, Kenya's youth remain resilient, determined to build a better future. Their courage is a reminder that change begins with those willing to stand up for what is right.
Now, are you? Are you willing to stand up for what is right? I am going to go over a few definitions. Democracy. Government by the people, exercised either directly or through elected representatives. A political or social unit that has such a government. The common people, considered as the primary source of political power. A majority rule. The principles of social equality and respect for the individual within a community. And government by the people, a form of government in which the supreme power is retained and directly exercised by the people. Sit back, think about that for a moment, and think about what you see in Canada today. Capitalism. An economic system in which the means of production and distribution are privately or corporately owned and development occurs through the accumulation and reinvestment of profits gained in a free market. An economic system based on predominantly private, individual, or corporate investment in and ownership of the means of production, distribution, and exchange of goods and wealth, contrasted with socialism or especially communism, in which the state has the predominant role in the economy. Pretty much a mirrored image of socialism or communism. And now capitalism, there's some arguments about how it should work. True democratic capitalism should always make sure that the people own all the resources and energies within. Multinational capitalism is where outside investment is allowed. How does that sound to the country we're in? Now I'm going to move to more of the political party edge of it. Tell me which parties this represents. Socialism. Any of various theories or systems of social organization in which the means of producing and distributing goods is owned collectively or by a centralized government that often plans and controls the economy. The stage in Marxist-Leninist theory intermediate between capitalism and communism, in which the means of production are collectively owned, but a completely classless society has not yet been achieved. A theory, a system of social reform which contemplates a complete reconstruction of society with a more just and equitable distribution of property and labor. In popular usage, the term is often employed to indicate any lawless revolutionary social scheme. That sounds very, very similar to what the Liberal and NDP have done to our country. But the closest resemblance to what those two parties have become are this word, fascism. And the reason I'm telling you these is because everybody seems to be wanting to throw these around, especially the fascists like to call the people who are fighting for democracy fascists. Listen very carefully to what fascism is. A system of government marked by centralization of authority under a dictator, a capitalist economy subject to stringent government controls, violent suppression of the opposition, and typically a policy of belligerent nationalism and racism. a political philosophy or movement based on or advocating such a system of government, oppressive, dictatorial control. I just wanted to make sure I threw those in there, considering what is going on in the world today, and we have an election coming up. I thought it was very important for everybody to understand the true definition of the words. So not only are we going to be hearing a lot of rhetoric coming from all of the different political parties, but we have been under control from a certain party, the Liberals, for 9 years, and propped up and supported by the NDP. Everything you are living today, all of the problems you have today, come from the party that is ruling today. Trump didn't do any of this. Elon didn't do any of this. This was all done from other Canadian citizens' votes, most of which had no idea what they were voting for, because all they have for media is what is blasted down their throats through the propaganda arm of the government. I know what propaganda is. I've studied it for decades. Please, people, like, share, and subscribe. It is important to get the word out, because a lot of people do not know the truth, and it's hard to have an argument with somebody. It's hard to convince them or to teach them when they are ignorant, because they are brainwashed by a system of propaganda. That's the hardest part about breaking fascism and socialism, is that the control of the propaganda arm is the true strength of their power. And we are better than that, because I know a lot of people who used to be Liberals and NDPers, and some that are still voting that way today. But like I said, I try to talk to them. They usually delete you on the friendship page or block you. Those ones, there's no help. But the ones that you can talk to, hold a adult conversation with them. Try and give them facts. Try and give them reality. And if you can, like, share, and subscribe, so that they can see it for themselves. And if you are, punch the notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Until next time, I'm Alias Tagai, and you've been watching the Canadian Citizen Journal.